of June here today to Radio Maria Ireland. Thanks for your company here. Father Eamonn McCarthy, of course, with you, the Priest Director of Radio Maria Ireland. If you're new to Radio Maria, lovely to have you with us. A couple of nice visitors have popped in today. Joan and Mary have dropped down to us from Newry today to pop in, and both indeed are listeners to Radio Maria and encouraging and promoting locally up in Newry and that northeastern side of the country a little bit for us. And we're hoping indeed to take a trip up northwards and to go visit you there and to help spread a little bit more about Radio Maria as well. So looking forward to that. We had a great trip out yesterday. I do hope you saw some of the images on our Facebook and our Instagram pages there. We had a little promotion in Shankill Parish here in the south of Dublin, and it was lovely to meet the wonderful parishioners there. Father Jamie was very kind to us, met the parish priest Father John as well, the Palatine Fathers, and it was a nice excursion, a lovely day in fact, and nice to meet people outside the church afterwards as well, safely, and of course with all the safeguards in mind, of course, protecting people and so on. But nonetheless, nice to get out and meet people who are listening to Radio Maria, and those indeed new to the radio, downloading the app and figuring out how to connect in and learn a bit more, and hopefully joining us maybe for a little bit of prayer and getting familiar with the radio, and maybe letting others know too. Because you, indeed, as you listen in and as you join in, are our best promoters, believe it or not. We can certainly do a great deal from the radio here by all means and set things up, but you indeed, as a fan of the radio and as a listener, can do a lot of great good. So we're on Facebook Live at the moment and YouTube Live too, so please do connect in and leave a comment as a nice thing to do. Below, you might have a thought or an idea or a reflection to share with us. We always do love to hear from you. And of course, you can telephone us 014-123-456. That's the landline number. Put a +353 in front of that if you're in the north or outside of Ireland, and you can dial up. Mary will answer the phone there, 014-123-456. Just type it into your phone there, keep it handy as a contact on your list there on your smartphone. That's another handy way of doing it. Excuse me. And the text number here, you can put that into your mobile phone or your device too, 089 467 2000. +353 89 467 2000. Or you can email us info@radiomaria.ie and write to us at St. Anthony's Business Park, Ballymount Road, Dublin 22. Thanks to Terry. Terry O'Neill was, I was sit down and have a cup of coffee someday with Terry. Met him a couple of years ago before the lockdown. Of course, since lockdown, everything's gone sideways, as we know. But Terry, all the time, very interested in the technical side of things. And just sent me a nice little picture here of some Bluetooth speakers that he uses, which he pairs with his phone for listening to Radio Maria in his car. Let's have a look at that. He sent me a little video there. Have a look at that. It's a nice idea. You can put a little Radio Maria logo on it, and it means you can just set your phone down and you can listen on a pair of speakers on your kitchen table maybe there. But to be a smartphone, you have to have the app, of course, for Radio Maria to connect it in. Thanks for that, Terry. Great. Let's follow that through with you and maybe have a chat with you and get a little update as well, because it was Terry actually who had the idea some time ago and did some fabulous research work on the idea of a DTT radio. And sadly, of course, that initiative ran aground, if you remember, and many of you indeed put your names down for a possible DTT radio. And what that really meant was like a Sairview radio, that you could get the television signal but receive it on the radio and listen into Radio Maria. And how it ran aground a little was that it really all depended on the quality of the Sairview signal and the possibility of receiving it, and proximity to the mast was a key element. So we did all the research we could. We were very enthusiastic about it, certainly, and would still certainly like to see it happen someday. But unfortunately, I think the technology isn't quite there, or at least the broadcast quality isn't strong enough. What it seems is that the Sairview signal on which you listen on your TV doesn't translate well into radio for a couple of reasons. One being that the signal isn't intended to be for moving reception or moving aerials, and rather it's meant for a rooftop aerial and in proximity to a mast. So because your TV, as you receive Sairview, is fixed, and because you have a fine aerial on the roof to receive it from, or a cable which is receiving it again via aerial transmission, then you can listen to Radio Maria on your TV with great facility. To translate that into a radio, you would need probably a connection to your rooftop aerial, and you would depend on the proximity to the mast as well. And we found that we had as we mentioned back along, a little mock-up of a Sairview radio, or a digital terrestrial television is what DTT is, radio. And we tried it around the country, and we're just disappointed that it was good in some places and non-existent in others. For instance, in Monaghan town, we stopped, we were passing through there, we set it up and nothing, couldn't get anything at all. And when we went over the border, it was interesting, the little DTT little device we had, the BBC radios came through loud and clear, but no trace of the Sairview channels. And it just wasn't a runner. What I did manage, in terms of the cost, we thought it would cost about €80 to make them. But that ran aground as well, because we went for prices to companies in China, and it just was getting out of hand. And then we didn't have a prototype to be able to test it, and the story goes on. So we did get a little pocket TV from a company in China, and these things are getting more popular, that would receive the Sairview signal. But again, it ran aground on the same strength, the fact that it needs a really serious aerial and needs to be near the mast for it to work. So that's my long-winded tale with the digital terrestrial television radio idea, which certainly was a noble one. We hope we're not going to give up on that altogether. It just, as I say, it ran aground. We've kept on record all the various names and numbers that we received at the time. And we do hope maybe some other angle might come good on it. We're not giving up altogether. So thanks to Terry indeed. Terry did some great work on that, and he just obviously promoted the idea of a Bluetooth transmission too. And Eamonn O'Sullivan was in with us recently too, and he was encouraging the idea of internet radio, which would work too, but again it means you'd have to have Wi-Fi in your home or broadband in your home. But you would have a device that looks like and acts like a radio and carry it around the house, and because it's working off the Wi-Fi and the internet signal, then it'll work fine, you know, because again, there's no aerials needed as such, it's just the Wi-Fi connection. So there are different ways of approaching it, and we're all the time sort of looking for ideas, and thanks again to Terry just for bringing that to the surface once more. We should keep the conversation going, just find helpful ways to enable everybody who wants to be able to listen in as well. You know, that's certainly the hope. Very good. The bishops have been meeting lately. This is the June meeting of the Bishops of Ireland. What's rattling there? Something, oh, there it is. The Bishops of Ireland have been meeting. They've, of course, remotely via Zoom, but their conference is every, is it 3 or 4 times a year? 4 times a year, I think they meet. So this is the June one. And so their summer meeting, instead of being at Maynooth, was hosted via video link on the internet. And the president of the conference, of course, is Archbishop Eamonn Martin, and the vice president, Archbishop Dermot Farrell, here in Dublin. And during their meeting, they acknowledged the depth of pain experienced by people whose loved ones have died during this difficult time. And they offered prayerful support to families who have suffered due to the restrictions placed on funeral rites and attendance too. Bishops have also expressed their thanks to the faithful for the prayers, sacrifice and perseverance, and for adhering to the public health restrictions due to the pandemic. And this commitment, surely, they say, has successfully served to protect life and health. And that's our prayer and our hope, very much so. So they have some agenda on that meeting. If you're a person for meetings, I don't know, meetings that can be quite a chore at times. And as a priest and in parishes, we're attached to so many committees, and the Burco boiler is the standing joke with committees. Because the Burco boiler is the thing that provides the tea to fuel the meetings. So the bishops, just by way of what they were speaking about, they've expressed their thanks for over 550 submissions received for the synodal pathway. There's a synod due to take place. 550 submissions is quite a substantial amount of interest in the synod, which will be a gathering indeed of the faithful and the bishops to look to the church in its current stage in Ireland and in the mission that lies ahead. Safeguarding children, of course, is very high on the agenda, if not top of the agenda, always with the bishops too. Northern Ireland and partition, 100 years this year since partition, and the ongoing journey of peace in the north, indeed, and fellowship there. Lovely to chat with the two ladies there from Newry. You know, there's some fabulous things going on in the north of Ireland for youth. Joan was talking about the Dominicans there in Newry having a fabulous Lectio gatherings of Lectio rooms there, which means there's obviously quite a number of people involved in Lectio Divina. Wonderful. So looking forward to hearing much more, please God, and learning much more from the church in Northern Ireland and the wonderful work that continues. Vaccine ethics and equity, interesting topic now for the bishops to chat about, you know, about safe and ethical vaccination and about equitable approach to it. And that's could be a difficult enough conversation perhaps too, given the division that exists in relation to it. It's contested certainly, but the hope for everyone, I suppose, and the hope we all have, is that we certainly be safe and well, and that whatever is introduced by way of a vaccine will be ethical and sound and proven and life-giving and protecting rather than life-endangering. So engaging with the Department of Education is on their agenda too, in speaking of patronage of schools. Birth information. I'm not sure what that means. Tracing heads of bill. Is there a bill in relation to that? I'm not sure. The welcome to Pope Francis, instituting the ministry of catechist was on their agenda too. The first World Day for grandparents and the elderly. I think that started here in Ireland. Catherine Wiley. Laudato Si was on the topic. Prisoner repatriation. Concern for prisoners. Lovely to read that too. Thanks from the bishops for generosity to Trócaire. That's the bishop's charity, of course, as we know, for the poor. A call on the government to recognise the state of Palestine. And then the terrible brutality in Myanmar. So international concerns for our bishops too. And various appointments that are made. Of course, there's a new appointee, bishop-elect for the bishop for the Diocese of Ferns. That's the priest from Killaloe, Father Des Nash, isn't it? I think it's Des Nash. Have I got that right? Or Joe Nash? Father Nash. So that always will concern the bishops too as well, and any vacancies there might be. So anyway, if you think you have tough meetings, I'm sure that's got to be a hard one, and the bishops certainly reaching out to us and sharing their thoughts and their ideas on each of these as well. So very good. Let me see. I'd have to sit down now and read. There's quite a lot of paper here in front of me now in relation to each of those individual topics. Let's see if one might just jump out at me here. So the bill, again, was introduced by the Minister for Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. This is the bill in the tracing heads of bill. Birth information. This must be a new government bill that's being introduced. And the bishops reiterating their commitment to ensuring that dioceses can legally share whatever information they have in relation to adopted persons. Yeah, there were some interesting protocols in the past about secrecy in relation to information, at least not, confidentiality. So that sounds like more of a data protection question, really. So they're going to chat with the minister in the coming days to discuss how this may be achieved in the legislation that's been drafted. Oh, I see, birth information. So it's in relation to perhaps adoptions and tracing of family members. That's quite a sensitive one, really, because you see, diocesan, this is interesting, canonical, this is why it affects the church in canon law. This might be a lesser known piece of information, but if there's ever, I remember being instructed in this, that if ever there was a baptism of a child who is legally adopted, well, the information in relation to that baptism wouldn't, only a copy would be kept in the local baptism register, but by the law of the church, there would be an official copy of that in a register in the diocesan offices. So in other words, that if there was any pursuing of information in relation to adoption and family members, it would always have to go through the diocesan office. And I suppose it's reasonable in a sense that just simply safeguards that information and the release of that information with due respect to all of the parties concerned, whatever the circumstances may or may not have been. I think that was sort of the idea of it. So there was a kind of a legal obligation there on behalf of the diocese. And so that's where that's come. Now I understand what's going on there as well. So, and then maybe just one other item that I share with you, just to go into the notes, the fuller notes. The first World Day for grandparents and the elderly, that the bishops welcomed this introduction by Pope Francis of this new World Day for grandparents and the elderly, which will be celebrated for the first time this year by the Universal Church on the 25th of July. And noting that yesterday was World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Gosh, that was a information that passed me by altogether. It's kind of difficult to keep in touch with all these various days for awareness in all kinds of areas. But that's, again, a very important issue, isn't it, to be mindful of. Throughout his papacy, Pope Francis has reminded us to value the many gifts of our grandparents and our elderly generation, and in recognition of their role, the Holy Father has now instituted an annual World Day into the church calendar to be celebrated on the Sunday closest to the feast of Saints Joachim and Anne, the parents of Mary and the grandparents of Jesus. That's a lovely thought now. I suppose we have Mother's Day, we have Father's Day, and why not Grandparents' Day and the Elderly Day too? So this offers a welcome focus by the Church on grandparents and elders, those wonderful elderly generation who have particularly suffered, of course, during the pandemic. Many older people sadly succumbed to the virus, while others had to cocoon for several months, unable to see their grandchildren and their families. So the theme for this year is I am with you always, highlighting that promise of closeness that generations share with each other. And if we see those connections weakening or dissolving, that's very sad that we should lose touch with the older generations who bear with them and carry with them the legacy of history and tradition in our families and our communities. So, you know, we do ourselves damage if we lose sight of that heritage that the elderly bring to us. Not only are our young people called to be present in the lives of older people, but so too grandparents and elders have a mission to encourage young people on their faith journey. So there's a reciprocal relationship there. I love that line in Scripture. Ask advice of every wise person. So we do well to spend time with the elderly and to ask them of the wisdom they have gathered over the years and the stories and the traditions again, so on, that they bear with them, and not to lose sight of that if we can at all, and to pass it on in our turn as well. I mean, if you're a young person or a relatively young person, just wind the clock forward 20, 30, 40, whatever number of years, and put yourself into that position, and see again the great value that a life well lived can be for those who are coming on after us, to encourage our youth, to bless them in their good endeavours and their zeal and their courage and their conviction that yes, they can in their turn make a difference. They can in their turn and have the responsibility in their turn to pass on the faith. And likewise, certainly as an older person, absolutely not to throw in the towel or to simply back off and say, well, now it's somebody else's turn. I don't think there's any limit really to the good we can continue to do, and the mission of the Church that we can embrace, no matter what age we are, no matter what our infirmity or capacity or otherwise. We all have a role very much to play. So young people can keep us young in that regard, and we can share their zeal and enthusiasm, perhaps albeit in a minor key, but nonetheless to see again, our role indeed as older, an older generation in leading and guiding our youth and bringing them blessings and praying and wishing blessings upon them and supporting and encouraging them as well. So, what was that story actually? I remember mentioned it before. A Legion of Mary story, being the centenary of the Legion, I'm allowed to indulge myself here, I think, of a younger boy, some years back now. I suppose it would have been back in the 70s maybe, but going with the Junior Legion to stand outside the churches after Mass and recruit for the Legion of Mary, whether it was praying members or active members. And the story goes that Frank Duff was at Mass. It must have been the inner city here in Dublin. It's where he used to go to Mass. Maybe Westmoreland Street, or what's the other one? The one in Church Street, the Franciscan church there, or maybe up the road to Phibsborough there, St. Peter's, the Vincentians. At any rate, there was a recruiting drive going on where the young legionaries were standing outside and meeting and greeting people on the way out and handing them the little prayer leaflet, excuse me, called the Tessera, and encouraging membership of the Legion of Mary. And this little boy approached Frank Duff. He had no idea who Frank Duff was. Frank Duff, of course, being the founder of the Legion. And Frank would have been in his late 80s, maybe 90 at this stage. And so the Junior Legion approached Frank Duff with a little prayer leaf and said, you know, good morning, sir, you know, nice to speak with you, nice to see you. Would you be interested in becoming an auxiliary member of the Legion of Mary, you know, praying member of the Legion? And Frank kind of looked at the Tessera and looked at the little boy, because the little boy, the young legionary, had no idea who he was speaking with. And Frank says, well, a praying member or an auxiliary member, why can't I become an active member? In other words, attending the meeting and doing active work, which of course Frank Duff had been doing since the outset and missed a day. And the little boy apparently looked at him and said, well, you're too old. And Frank Duff just laughed, I'm sure laughed his head off. He had great sense of humour. And his point was, look, no one is too old to be actively involved in the life and the mission of the church. Absolutely not. So we do well, certainly, with the commemoration of grandparents and the elderly, not to write the elderly off, nor, if you are elderly, not to write yourself off either. To say, look, I'm done. I'm winding down. I'm in the, I'm in the annex. What's the other word? Not the Twilight Zone. She's talking in my ear now. No, the departure lounge is what I was thinking of. Twilight Zone. No, if you're in the departure lounge, you're getting ready to go. So if that's where you are in the departure lounge, the plane hasn't gone yet. There's still work to be done. So across the country, parishes are invited to celebrate grandparents, elders, older priests and religious who have given lives of dedicated service to their families and communities. Parishes are always asked to ensure that their local nursing caring home is included in this annual celebration. So make a little something out of it. The 25th of July is the date for that. So the Bishop's Council for Marriage and Family will provide resources for parishes. It'll be on the Bishop's website, catholicbishops.ie. So the bishops are busy, not an easy job by any means, not an easy job. I'm trying to think of everything and think of everybody and to remember them all as well. Well, yes, thanks, Catherine. There's just sent through the nuridominican.com. They have a Lectio Centre there. So do have a look at that and check that out as well. Now, we have a lovely song that you will have heard, I'm sure, a number of times if you're a long-term listener here, The Rise of the Roses. It's the Peace Prayer, and I do hope our dear friend in the Philippines is listening in. Let me just whittle my way back here through the emails. And she's just a big fan of The Rise of the Roses. You know the title music that we play at the beginning of Rosary Stories? That'll be on tonight at 6:45 with Father Marius. And it's just lovely guitar and Hail Mary, full of grace. It's just really catchy and really lovely. But the same group now, The Rise of the Roses, have done this peace prayer, and it's Marielle Munar was in touch, and she says, thanks very much, Father Eamonn, for your reply. I'm so delighted. She was looking for the names, Maeve, Carlin, and Hannah, called the Goretti Girls. And Mariel had done a bit of research herself to get to, because they came to the studio here back in 2015, before my time, and there's images of them on way back on our Facebook page. And and they went around the country promoting religious life, I think was it, and singing, just beautiful singers. So Mariel asked me, she says, Father, if it isn't too much to ask, would it be possible for you to play again in one of your Chatechesis hours on Radio Maria their song, The Peace Prayer, the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi? And the lyrics, she says, were like something like, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Well, that's the peace prayer associated with St. Francis. So, Mariel, thanks for getting in touch with us all the way from the Philippines, and so glad you're listening in and so glad you're enjoying this. Here we are in the Chatechesis hour, and now the Peace Prayer by the Rise of the Roses. Excuse me. No. It's lovely music, really nice. Thank you. That was absolutely stunning. I wonder where those girls are actually. We should get them back into the studio, and I see they're still on Facebook and active on Facebook too. Perhaps they haven't been traveling around, or maybe they started families since this is 6 years ago now. They might have. I'm not sure. Hopefully they're still around. It would be lovely to have them back, come back in and visit. They've surely composed other music since. Absolutely gorgeous. So, Mariel, thanks for getting in touch, and I hope you enjoy listening to that. If you're not listening now, maybe you'll catch this as a podcast later on. A beautiful piece of music indeed. So thanks. Christine is watching on Facebook Live, sending us lots of hearts. Have a look on the Facebook comments there. You'll see about 13 or 14 of them, I think, there. Thanks, Christine. So good to have you watching in from the US this morning. Early morning for you, in fact, this hour of the day. So God bless you. Now let me just do a little bit more of the Chatechesis part and a bit of chat thrown in, I suppose, as well. Again, we're sharing with you this beautiful document inspiring Vatican teaching from Vatican Council II, Second Vatican Council, Ad Gentes, and talking about missionary activity as being really the manifestation of God's plan in the world. This is why the Lord came. It's to believe in Him, to know Him, to love Him, to be happy with Him for all eternity. There's no other plan here. This is the basic bread and butter, the central heart of our faith. And so to be missionary is, to be Catholic is by definition to be missionary. Remember that Frank Duff article that I like the catchy title of, Unapostolic Catholicism is an Anomaly. It's a mouthful. It's just very, very cleverly worded. So not to be apostolic, not to be missionary, not to be reaching out in some way as a Catholic is an anomaly. It's just, why are you not doing this? Why are you not engaged in some shape, size, or form? And this is, through its mission, the Church clearly brings to its conclusion the history of salvation. What else is at stake but the second coming of Christ? What else is at stake but the salvation of souls? That's another one of Frank Duff's articles. Souls are at stake. I think it's in the Handbook of the Legion too. It's a great vision to have. He'll be a massive saint, please God, when he's canonized. What a vision. Sit down, he said, and pray over a map of the world for a minute every day. It's like I was saying in the homily this morning at Mass, stop in the supermarket with your trolley. Just stand there for a minute as if you're thinking what you want to buy next. Just look around at all the food and just marvel. Here in the West now, certainly, at the abundance that we have received. And then do the same with your faith and say, look, what abundance, Jesus in the Holy Eucharist that we've been given. Can we possibly be given any more? And so, surely then there's an obligation upon us to share what we have received. Through preaching and the celebration of the sacraments, of which the Holy Eucharist is the center and summit, missionary activity makes Christ present, He who is the author of salvation. There's no name under heaven and earth other than that of Christ by which we can be saved. It doesn't matter where you live, what era you live in, or what you believe or not believe, we're all through Christ saved. But do we believe that? Have we even heard of that good news? Have people drifted from these things? We need reminders. And very often gentle reminders will do. The ladies were chatting about this even in their own families, just downstairs this morning. Just gentle reminders. Doesn't need to be overt or in your face. As Mary was saying, just having the radio on in the kitchen. Radio Maria, that is. How can not those passing through the kitchen not somehow, if they're not attuned to it altogether, not absorb at least some element of it? Who knows? So it purges of evil associations those elements of truth and grace which are found among peoples and which are, as it were, a secret presence of God. Again, allowing for the goodness and truth that does pervade, which is there. You see, nobody is evil in and of themselves. We don't. It's in our human nature to seek the good, to seek the truth, to seek what is beautiful, these absolutes. But the snag is, or the problem is, we might see as good something which, in the light of Christ, is not at all good. So we might pursue ends such as fame or fortune or pleasure, which seem in and of themselves good. But in the light of Christ, we see, no, this does not serve the human person towards ultimate goodness and ultimate truth. So what the Church would say is, well, there are seeds of goodness and truth there. There's a desire towards what is good, but not the highest good of all. And so the gospel enters in then and purifies of evil associations those elements of truth and grace which are there already. So it just purifies that thirst or that desire, a secret presence of God. Interesting idea. And it restores them to Christ, their source. So you see, the source of all goodness is in Christ Jesus. All truth is in Him, all wisdom. I am the way, the truth, and the life. So by bringing Christ to others, nice and gently, but with trust and with confidence, it helps to purify then the misdirected journey that some are on towards a good that won't last, to bring them back to a journey where there's a good that will last. So it restores them to Christ, who overthrows the rule of the devil and limits the manifold malice of evil. So when we begin to follow Christ, it means a change of direction. It means a turning from old evil, selfish ways. It means repentance. It means reconciliation. And in the Gospel this morning, after the Our Father that is given to us in Matthew, forgiveness. Forgiveness. Forgive as we forgive those. That's what Christ puts before us. And that's no small challenge there, but that delivers us then from the influence of evil. And we stay focused on Christ, then evil can do its worst. And we are at peace. So, whatever goodness is found in the minds and hearts of the human person, or in the particular customs and cultures of peoples, far from being lost, is purified. Remember St. Patrick came to Ireland, and you had the fire on the hill of Tara and all these other pagan rituals and customs. And there was a goodness in that, a secret goodness, misdirected, of course, as these things were, away to false gods. But the desire of the human heart was otherwise noble in the pursuit of life after death, in the pursuit of what was perceived to be good. But you bring the light of Christ to bear on that, and it just redirects it. It just sort of shoots it off, probably 180 degrees, ultimately, because it's to Christ now is where the journey looks to for the truthful fulfillment of all these goods that are otherwise being pursued. So far from being lost then, it's purified and raised to a higher level and reaches its perfection for the glory of God, the confusion of the demon, and the happiness of the human person. And that's where the moral section of the Catechism begins. It tells us about beatitude or blessedness. And that's, again, that's what everyone wants, isn't it? I often have this conversation in school, with the young people in the class, the teenagers, of course. What is it you want? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? What's your long-term plan here? And invariably, it was, get me out of school, earn my first million, live happily ever after, live fast and wild and loose, and all those things the world offers, which, again, so superficial and just so, but at least like the desire in their hearts was something good and worthy and worthwhile. But to just direct that according to the truth of Jesus and what that demands, which again is why, as you know, I was paid to try to pass on to the young people the idea of volunteering for something, that don't endlessly pursue pleasure and fulfillment, because if you go looking for it like that, you probably won't find it. It's in giving yourself away that you will receive. That's the message that Jesus brings to us. That's the mission. There's the task. Thus, missionary activity, Gentes goes on to the end of the chapter here. It tends towards eschatological fullness. It's a big meaty word there. The eschaton or eschatos is a Greek word meaning the end things, or the conclusion, or the last things, death, judgment, heaven and hell, the four last things, like the leaving cert, as in leaving the world, the second coming of Christ, when it's all over, when the final whistle blows and it's out of the pool, game over. What is the eschatological fullness? What is the conclusion of it all? What's the culmination of it? What's the point? Where is it yielding? Where's the summit here? And it's Christ, in communion with Christ. All missionary activity tends towards eschatological fullness. By it, the people of God is expanded to the degree and until the time that the Father has fixed by his own authority. Of it was it said in prophecy, enlarge the space for your tent and spread out your tent clothes unsparingly. That's the prophet Isaiah. That's not one you come across very often there. Enlarge your tent. By missionary activity, the mystical body is enlarged until it reaches the mature fullness of Christ, the spiritual temple where God is adored in spirit and truth, grows and is built up on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone. So that's the end of the first chapter that we've got through, and that was painless. No, you didn't even notice we got through all that wonderful reading material and content of chapter 1, which was the doctrinal principles of mission. So from paragraph 2 through the paragraph 9 there of Ad Gentes. Chapter 2 now deals with more specifically a missionary work. Should be very interesting in its own right as well. So I hope that helps a little bit. You see, we're trying to summarize and bring together what the church understands by its own life in Christ, and bringing Christ to others and bringing others to Christ. And if you haven't realized it yet, you are very much a part of this, and most particularly here on Radio Maria, because you listen, you pray with us, you pray for us, you accompany us, you engage in the conversation here, you look for prayer requests, intentions to be made, you share with us by letting others know about Radio Maria, and likewise too, you help us financially and with your spiritual support. All of these things, you are being missionary today by doing so. So please do continue to help us on that road and that journey together. So now this brings an end to today's Chatechesis. Always seems to pass so quickly. Thank you for your company. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for your marvelous support of Radio Maria here. Do look out for the rest of our shows and programming throughout the rest of today, this Thursday. Lots of lovely programs to share. Later on into the evening, of course, the 1 in 10 Rosary after the Rosary at 6:10, Father Marius and Rosary Stories, and then the Catholic Index books and movie reviews after 6 p.m. Now it's 12 o'clock. Let's pause for our Angelus and midday prayer.